Black Project, a program whose existence is itself classified. It is funded through a concealed line in the defense budget, publicly reported only as a lump sum with no description attached. Officials will not confirm that it exists. Congressional briefings are restricted to a small number of members without staff present. Because the defining feature is secrecy, every project in this list has one thing in common. It is here only because it was eventually declassified. The ones that are still running have no names yet. Manhattan Project, the program that built the atomic bomb, running from 1942 to 1946. At its peak, it employed roughly 130,000 people across sites in Tennessee, Washington, and New Mexico, and consumed about $2 billion. Almost none of those workers knew what they were building. Congress funded it without being told its purpose. Vice President Harry Truman was not briefed on its existence until after Roosevelt died, and he had already become president. Operation Paperclip, a United States program that recruited German scientists and engineers at the end of the Second World War, beginning in 1945. Roughly 1,600 people were brought to the United States to work on rockets, aviation, and chemical weapons. Many had been members of the Nazi Party, and some had used slave labor from concentration camps. President Truman had explicitly ordered that no active Nazi supporters be admitted. Intelligence officers rewrote the personnel files to remove the disqualifying information. Wernher von Braun, who had overseen production at a facility where thousands of prisoners died building V-2 rockets, went on to design the launch vehicle that carried Apollo to the moon. Project Aquatone, the CIA program that produced the U-2 spy plane, authorized by Eisenhower in 1954 and built by Lockheed's Skunk Works in 8 months. It flew at 70,000 feet, above the reach of Soviet interceptors. On May 1, 1960, Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union. The United States announced that a NASA weather research aircraft had strayed off course. Khrushchev then produced both the wreckage and the pilot alive, and Eisenhower was forced to admit the cover story publicly. Project Oxcart, the CIA successor to the U-2, which became the A-12 and later the Air Force SR-71 Blackbird. It cruised at Mach 3.2 at 90,000 feet and remains the fastest air-breathing crewed aircraft ever flown. The airframe was 93% titanium, and the United States could not source enough of it domestically. The CIA created front companies to buy titanium from the largest supplier in the world, which was the Soviet Union. The program was declassified in 2007. Project Corona, the first photographic reconnaissance satellites, operating from 1959 to 1972 under the public cover of a scientific program called Discoverer. Film was exposed in orbit, ejected in a capsule, and caught in midair by an aircraft trailing a net. The first 12 launches failed, the 13th succeeded, and that single mission returned more imagery of Soviet territory than every U-2 flight combined. The program remained secret for 23 years after its final flight. Project Mogul, a United States Air Force program launched in 1947 to detect Soviet nuclear tests by flying microphone arrays on high-altitude balloon trains and listening for the acoustic signature of a detonation carried through the upper atmosphere. The equipment was classified, the balloons were not. In June 1947, one of these balloon trains came down on a ranch outside Roswell, New Mexico. The military first announced it had recovered a flying disc, then retracted the statement within a day and said it was a weather balloon. Neither account was true because the real answer was classified. Project Mogul was not declassified until 1994, by which point the original cover story had produced nearly 50 years of speculation the Air Force could not correct without revealing the program. Have Blue, the Lockheed demonstrator that proved stealth was possible, first flown in December 1977. Its surface was built from flat, angular panels calculated to deflect radar energy away from the receiver rather than absorb it. The shape was so aerodynamically unstable it could only be flown by computer. Both prototypes crashed during testing. The design became the F-117 Nighthawk, which flew in 1981, and was operated in total secrecy for 7 years before its existence was acknowledged in 1988. Tacit Blue. A Northrop demonstrator flown in 1982, nicknamed the Whale for its shape. Where Have Blue used flat angular panels, Tacit Blue proved that smooth curved surfaces could also defeat radar, which required far more computing power to model. It made 135 flights and was never intended for production. It existed to prove a principle. That principle produced the B-2 Spirit bomber. Tacit Blue was declassified in 1996, 14 years after its first flight. Project Azorian. This was a CIA operation to raise a sunken Soviet ballistic missile submarine from 3 miles down in the Pacific Ocean, conducted in 1974. The cover story was that the billionaire Howard Hughes had built a ship to mine manganese nodules from the seafloor. The recovery vessel cost approximately $350 million. During the lift, the submarine broke apart, and most of it fell back to the bottom. When journalists later filed requests for records, the CIA replied that it could neither confirm nor deny the existence of the documents. That phrasing is now standard legal language worldwide. Operation Ivy Bells, a joint Navy and NSA operation beginning in 1971. Divers operating from a modified submarine placed a recording device on a Soviet military communications cable lying on the floor of the Sea of Okhotsk. The Soviets transmitted over it without encryption because the cable sat inside their own territorial waters and they believed it was unreachable. American submarines returned periodically to swap the recording pod. The operation ran undetected for nearly a decade until an NSA analyst sold its existence to the KGB in 1980. MKULTRA. This was a CIA program running from 1953 to 1973 to research chemical and psychological methods of controlling human behavior. It funded work at more than 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons. Subjects were dosed with LSD without their knowledge or consent, including CIA employees, psychiatric patients, and members of the public. At least one death is directly attributed to the program. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the files destroyed ahead of a congressional investigation. The program only became publicly known because roughly 20,000 financial records had been misfiled in a separate location and survived the purge. What is known about MKUltra is what the accountants happened to keep. Project Iceworm. A United States Army plan to build a network of tunnels beneath the Greenland ice sheet housing 600 ballistic missiles within range of the Soviet Union. Construction began in 1959 at a site presented publicly as an Arctic research station and powered by a portable nuclear reactor. The Danish government, which held sovereignty over Greenland, was never informed of the weapons component. The project was abandoned when engineers determined the ice was moving fast enough to crush the tunnels. It was declassified in 1997. Manned Orbiting Laboratory, a United States Air Force program to place a crewed military space station in orbit, with astronauts personally operating reconnaissance cameras over Soviet territory. It ran from 1963 to 1969 and consumed roughly $1.5 billion. It was canceled before a single crewed launch, largely because unmanned satellites had improved faster than anyone anticipated. The program was not declassified until 2015. Several of its astronauts transferred to NASA and later flew on the Space Shuttle. National Reconnaissance Office, not a project but an entire agency. Established in 1961 to build and operate American reconnaissance satellites, its existence was classified for 31 years. It was not publicly acknowledged until September 1992. 2 years later, it emerged that the agency had constructed a headquarters complex in Virginia costing over $300 million without Congress clearly understanding what it had approved. For 3 decades, one of the largest intelligence organizations in the United States officially did not exist. Area 51, the test facility where most of the aircraft in this list were first flown. Established in the Nevada desert in 1955 for the U-2 program. The site appeared on no map. Employees flew in daily on unmarked aircraft and could not tell their families where they worked. Despite appearing in public satellite imagery for decades, the United States government did not officially acknowledge that the facility existed until June 2013, when a declassified CIA history was released in response to a records request. Thanks for watching. Which one did I miss? Drop it in the comments. Also, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.